Good evening, friends. Get ready for 4 terrifying horror stories. Before we begin, I want to know, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers. Now, without further delay, turn off the lights, adjust the volume, and let's go straight into the fear. The Dalton Highway doesn't forgive mistakes. 414 miles of ice and permafrost stretching from Living Good to Dead Horse, cutting through the Brooks Range like a scar across the face of God. I've been running this route for 11 years, hauling equipment to the oil fields on the North Slope, and I know every blind curve, every treacherous grade, every place where the road narrows to nothing but packed snow and faith. But I'd never seen a child out there. Not until February 16th, when the temperature hit 47 below zero and the world became something hostile and alien. It was 2:17 a.m. according to my dashboard clock. I remember because I'd been checking it obsessively, counting down the hours until I'd reached Coldfoot Camp and could sleep for a few precious hours before the return haul. The darkness up there in winter isn't like darkness anywhere else. It's absolute. Consuming. The kind of black that makes you understand why ancient humans feared the night. My headlights carved a weak tunnel through it, illuminating nothing but endless white and the occasional reflective marker post. That's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing on the shoulder of the road in pink pajamas covered with cartoon unicorns. No coat. No boots. Just bare feet on ice that could freeze flesh solid in minutes. Her blonde hair whipped around her face in the wind, and she was staring directly into my headlights with eyes that didn't blink, didn't squint, didn't react at all to the blinding glare. My brain couldn't process it. Refused to process it. There are no houses for 60 miles in either direction. No settlements. Nothing but wilderness so hostile that even the animals hibernate or flee. A child couldn't survive out here for 30 seconds, let alone long enough to be standing upright, calm, as if waiting for a school bus in suburban Seattle. I slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered, tires fighting for purchase on the ice. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't possible. I was hallucinating. Had to be. 46 years old. Too many years of long hauls and short sleep, too much coffee and not enough real food. My doctor had warned me about the effects of chronic exhaustion. The mind plays tricks, he'd said. Especially in extreme isolation. But when the truck stopped and I looked again, she was still there. Still motionless. Still staring. I grabbed my emergency spotlight, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Threw open the door and jumped down, the cold hitting me like a physical assault. Even through my insulated coveralls, thermal layers, and heavy parka, the air felt like it was stripping flesh from bone. Jesus Christ, kid, what are you doing out here? My voice sounded strange, flattened by the vast emptiness. Where are your parents? She didn't answer. Didn't move. Just kept staring at me with those wide, unblinking eyes. I took a step toward her. You're going to die out here. Do you understand? You need to get in the truck right now. The spotlight beam caught her fully now, and my stomach dropped. Her skin was too pale. Not just winter pale, but corpse pale, almost translucent. I could see the delicate tracery of blue veins beneath the surface. And her feet, those bare feet on the ice, they should have been black with frostbite, tissue damage, something. But they looked perfect. Untouched. Okay, sweetheart, I'm going to pick you up now. I moved closer, my mind racing. Had to be a car accident. Parents crashed somewhere nearby, kid wandering in shock. Hypothermia does strange things to the brain. Makes you feel hot when you're freezing. Makes you strip off your clothes. Makes you calm when you should be terrified. I reached out to grab her, to save her from the cold that should have already killed her. She turned and ran. Not away from the road, into the tundra where any sensible person would expect, but along the shoulder, parallel to the highway, her bare feet silent on the packed snow. Fast. Impossibly fast. Faster than any child should be able to move. Wait. Stop. I ran after her, the spotlight beam bouncing wildly. My breath came in ragged gasps, freezing instantly into ice crystals that hung in the air. My lungs burned. After maybe 20 meters, I had to stop, doubled over, coughing. When I looked up, she was gone. Completely gone. I swung the spotlight in frantic arcs. Nothing. Just undisturbed snow stretching to the horizon in every direction. No footprints but my own. No tracks. No sign that she ever been there at all. My hands were shaking now for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. I played the spotlight over the area again and again, desperate for some explanation. Found nothing. The wind had picked up, that distinctive Arctic howl that sounds like voices if you listen too long, and I suddenly became aware of how utterly alone I was. How far from help. How easy it would be to die out here if something went wrong. I backed toward the truck, not wanting to turn away from the emptiness, some primal part of my brain screaming that there was danger in showing my back to the dark. Once inside, I locked the doors. Ridiculous, who locks their doors in the middle of nowhere, and sat there trembling, engine idling, heater blasting. Hallucination. Had to be. The fatigue, the isolation, the sensory deprivation of endless night. My brain manufacturing stimuli where none existed. I'd heard of it happening to long-haul truckers. Highway hypnosis. Microsleeps. Visual distortions. I forced myself to breathe steadily, to think rationally. I'd been on the road for 14 hours straight. Probably drifted off for a second, dreamed the whole thing. The mind can manufacture incredibly vivid false memories in the space between waking and sleep. Convinced, or trying to convince myself, I put the truck in gear and continued north. But I drove slowly now, watching the roadside with a paranoid intensity, jumping at every shadow, every wind-stirred drift of snow. At Coldfoot Camp, I stumbled into the dining area where a handful of other drivers sat drinking coffee. Jim Kowalski, who'd been running the Dalton even longer than me, took one look at my face and frowned. "You look like you saw a ghost, Hanson." The word ghost made something crawl up my spine. "Weird night," I muttered, pouring coffee with hands that still hadn't stopped shaking. "Thought I saw nothing. Just tired." "Saw what?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real. Make me sound crazy. But the words came anyway, tumbling out before I could stop them. "A kid. Little girl on the side of the road around mile 230. Pink pajamas. No coat." The conversation in the room died. Every driver was looking at me now with expressions I couldn't read. Jim set down his coffee very carefully. "Blonde hair?" My blood turned to ice water. "How did you—" "Third sighting this month," another driver interrupted, older guy named Pete. "I saw her 2 weeks ago. Mile 245. Same description. Pink pajamas, bare feet. She ran when I tried to help." "I saw her too," a woman named Sarah spoke up from the corner. "Mile 218. February 3rd, filed a report with the troopers because I thought there had to be a crash nearby, missing kid. They searched. Found nothing." "This isn't funny," I said, my voice coming out harder than intended. "If there's really a kid out there—" "There is," Jim interrupted. "But it's not what you think. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through until he found what he was looking for, then slid it across the table to me. A news article from the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, dated 6 weeks ago. Emma Hartwell, 8, daughter of North Slope worker, missing after sleepwalking episode. The photo showed a little blonde girl in a school picture, smiling gap-toothed at the camera. The same girl. The exact same girl I'd seen on the highway. I read the article with growing horror. Emma's mother had died in a vehicle accident on the Dalton Highway the previous summer. Her father, Mike Hartwell, worked as a supervisor at one of the drilling operations near Deadhorse. He brought Emma up to stay with him during Christmas break. On January 9th, Emma had walked out of their housing unit in the middle of the night, still asleep, wandering into the Arctic darkness wearing only her pajamas. They found her 3 hours later, 11 miles from the facility. She was alive. Barely. Her core temperature was 71 degrees. Both feet were destroyed by frostbite, tissue frozen solid. They amputated both legs mid-calf at the hospital in Fairbanks. But here was the part that made my skin crawl. This wasn't the first time. According to the article, Emma had developed severe parasomnia after her mother's death, a dissociative sleepwalking disorder triggered by trauma. She'd escaped from their home in Anchorage 5 times before her father brought her north. Each time, they found her miles away, in dangerous situations, with no memory of how she'd gotten there. The medical experts quoted in the article explained it as a stress response. The girl's brain was trying to escape reality, literally walking away from the trauma while her conscious mind shut down. In her sleep state, she couldn't feel pain or cold. Her body's normal protective responses didn't function. She could walk for hours in lethal conditions without her brain registering the danger. After the amputation, they transferred her to a psychiatric facility in Seattle for intensive treatment. So what the hell are we seeing? I demanded. If she's in Seattle. She escaped, Sarah said quietly. 3 days ago. I checked this morning after I heard Pete's report. There was a news alert. They don't know where she is. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the building's heating system. You're saying she's actually out there, I said slowly. Actually walking the highway in her sleep. In 40 below temperatures. With no feet. The human brain is a terrifying thing when it's broken, Jim said. I've read about cases like this. Dissociative fugue states. People who've traveled hundreds of miles with no memory, no awareness. Their brain just shuts off everything except the most basic motor functions. But how is she surviving? She's 8 years old with amputated legs in the Arctic in winter. Maybe she's not, Pete interrupted, his voice rough. Maybe we're seeing her in the hours before the cold finally wins. The implications of that hung in the air like a toxic cloud. We could be watching a child's final hours, over and over, and there was nothing we could do because we couldn't catch her, couldn't find her, couldn't save her. I called the Alaska State Troopers from Coldfoot. Reported the sighting with exact coordinates and time. The dispatcher took the information with weary professionalism, clearly not the first such call. She said they had search teams deployed, helicopters on standby, thermal imaging drones. But the Dalton Highway covered 400 miles of roadway with hundreds of thousands of square miles of wilderness on either side. Finding one small person who was actively fleeing help was nearly impossible. I should have stayed at Coldfoot. Should have slept. But I couldn't. The thought of that little girl out there, her brain locked in some nightmare loop, walking on stumps through hell frozen over, not feeling the cold that was killing her, it was unbearable. I drove back south, slowly, searching. Mile after mile of nothing. At mile 230, where I'd first seen her, I stopped and got out, playing my spotlight over the tundra. Looking for any sign. Any clue. That's when I saw the tracks. Not footprints. She didn't have feet. But marks in the snow. Small divots, dragging trails. A pattern that suggested something moving on its knees, or stumps, crawling, leading away from the road into the wilderness. I followed them. I know it was stupid. No, I should have called it in, waited for professionals. But I couldn't stop myself. The tracks led maybe 50 meters from the road to a small depression in the snow, partially sheltered by a cluster of stunted willows. She was there, curled in a ball, her pink pajamas now gray with ice and dirt. Her stumps were black, frozen solid, the flesh split open where the bones had broken through. She wasn't moving. Wasn't breathing as far as I could tell. "Emma," I said softly, approaching carefully. "Emma, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. Those same wide, blank eyes I'd seen on the highway. But now there was something else there. A flicker of awareness. Of terror. Of pain finally breaking through whatever mechanism had been protecting her from reality. "It hurts," she whispered. "Mommy, it hurts so much." I grabbed my radio, screaming for help, giving coordinates, begging them to send a medevac helicopter. Then I stripped off my parka and wrapped her in it, trying to warm her, knowing it was probably too late but unable to accept it. "You're going to be okay," I lied. "Help is coming. Just stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me about your mom." "I was looking for her," Emma said, her voice distant, dreamy. "She's out here somewhere. I know she is. I hear her calling me. Every night. She wants me to find her." My throat closed. The mother had died on this highway. The article had mentioned it. Emma's brain, shattered by grief and trauma, had created a delusion that her mother was still out here, somewhere in the frozen vastness, waiting to be found. And every night, the girl's sleeping mind took over and sent her body on an impossible quest to find a ghost. "Your mom would want you to be safe," I managed to say. "She'd want you to go home. To get better." "I can't stop," Emma whispered. "Even when I'm awake now, I hear her. She's calling. She needs me. I have to find her." The helicopter arrived 18 minutes later, 18 minutes that felt like hours. I watched them load Emma's tiny, broken body into the aircraft, watched it disappear into the darkness, rotors thudding against the empty sky. She died 2 days later at Providence, Alaska Medical Center in Anchorage. Multiple organ failure due to extreme hypothermia and infection from her injuries. The doctors said it was a miracle she'd survived as long as she did. That the dissociative state had probably kept her alive longer than should have been possible by shutting down her perception of pain and cold, allowing her to continue moving when a normal person would have collapsed. I quit long-haul trucking the day after her funeral. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't drive that highway knowing what I knew. Couldn't handle the darkness and the isolation and the knowledge of what the human mind is capable of when it breaks. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night, the thing I told no one because it sounds insane. When the troopers investigated, trying to understand Emma's final journey, they tracked her movements using security cameras at the oil facilities and testimony from drivers who'd seen her. They mapped everywhere she'd been sighted over the 6 weeks she'd been missing from Seattle. Every location, every single sighting, was within 100 meters of where her mother's fatal accident had occurred. Mile 218, Mile 230, Mile 245. All clustered around Mile 229.7, where Jennifer Hartwell had lost control on black ice and rolled her vehicle into a ravine. Emma hadn't been wandering randomly. Her sleeping brain had GPS guided her across thousands of miles, from Seattle to Alaska, to the exact stretch of highway where her mother had died. Had walked her on frozen stumps, in lethal cold, through terrain that should have killed her a dozen times over. Looking for our mother. And finding her, in a way. Because Emma died less than a quarter-mile from where Jennifer's body had been recovered. I drive a delivery route in Fairbanks now. Local work. Home every night. But sometimes, when I'm fighting insomnia at 2 a.m., I think about that little girl. About the power of a child's grief to override survival instincts, to push a small body beyond all reasonable limits, to walk through hell itself in search of something lost. I think about how the mind can trap us in our worst moments, loop us endlessly through our trauma, turn us into ghosts haunting our own lives. And I wonder, if love and loss can do that to an 8-year-old girl, what horrors are we all capable of? What private hells do we create for ourselves? What impossible journeys do we make in our sleep, chasing the dead? I don't have answers. Just the memory of pink pajamas against white snow, and the knowledge that the scariest monsters aren't the ones in the dark. They're the ones inside us, wearing our own faces, calling us toward oblivion in voices we trust. I've delivered propane to remote cabins across Alaska for 11 years, and I thought I'd seen every flavor of isolation the state could offer. Places where the silence is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. Cabins accessible only by float plane in summer, snowmobile in winter. People who choose to live so far from civilization that their nearest neighbor might as well be on another planet. But Lake Iliamna is different. Something about that massive body of water, larger than the state of Rhode Island, carved deep into the earth like a wound, breeds a particular kind of loneliness. The kind that gets inside you, changes you. I should have recognized the warning signs. The order came through on November 12th, simple enough, deliver 400 gallons of propane to a cabin on the lake's northwest shore. Customer name, Patrick Newman. Address was just GPS coordinates and a note, accessible via ice road from Pile Bay when lake freezes, otherwise boat/plane only. The lake had frozen early that year, unseasonably cold October creating ice thick enough to support vehicles by mid-November. I loaded up my truck in Iliamna, the village, not the lake, just after dawn. Dawn being a relative term that far north in November. More like a brief gray smudge of light that passes for day before the darkness clamps down again. The temperature sat at 8 below zero, cold enough that my breath crystallized instantly, cold enough that the propane tanks rang like bells when I secured them. The ice road was marked with reflectors on poles every 50 meters, a glowing breadcrumb trail across the frozen lake. I'd driven ice roads before, knew the particular terror of feeling the ice flex beneath several tons of truck, hearing it groan and crack like something alive. But this was solid. 3 feet thick at least. Safe as any highway. The cabin sat about 12 miles out, tucked against the shoreline in a small cove. I could see smoke rising from the chimney as I approached, which was good. Meant someone was home, meant I wouldn't have to unload alone in the gathering darkness. The structure was decent sized, maybe 1,200 square feet, logs withered silver gray, solar panels on the roof. The kind of setup that screamed serious off-gridder rather than weekend retreat. I pulled up around 3:30 p.m., the sun already bleeding out on the horizon. Killed the engine and sat for a moment, studying the place. Something felt off, though I couldn't articulate what. Maybe it was the way the curtains were drawn despite the daylight. Maybe it was the absolute stillness, no dog barking, no movement, nothing but that thin stream of smoke. 41 years old and I developed decent instincts about people and places. Right now those instincts were whispering that I should leave the tanks and go. But I needed a signature. Needed confirmation of delivery. Company policy. I climbed out, my boots crunching on the snow-covered ice. The cold hit immediately, that particular Arctic bite that finds every gap in your clothing. I walked to the cabin door and knocked. Nothing. Knocked again, harder. Propane delivery for Patrick Newman. Still nothing. But I could hear something inside. A scraping sound. Rhythmic. Like furniture being dragged across a floor. I tried the handle. The door swung open easily, revealing a dim interior lit only by a fire burning in a stone fireplace. The scraping sound stopped immediately. "Hello? Mr. Newman? It's the propane delivery." My voice sounded wrong in that space. Too loud. Too intrusive. The cabin's interior was sparse: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a cot in the corner, shelves lined with canned goods and books. Everything neat. Almost obsessively neat. No personal items. No photographs. No clutter. Like a stage set rather than a place where someone actually lived. Then I saw him. A man sat in one of the chairs, facing away from me toward the fire. He didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge my presence at all. Just sat there, completely still. "Sir? I've got your propane delivery. I need you to sign. Help me." The voice was wrong. Too hoarse. Too desperate. Not at all matching the casual posture of the seated figure. Every hair on my body stood up. Something was profoundly wrong here. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call for? Please. Help me. He's here." I took a step closer, my hand instinctively moving toward the knife I kept on my belt. In the firelight, I could now see that the man's hands were behind the chair. Not resting behind him. Bound behind him. Duct taped silver bright around his wrists. Jesus Christ. I moved quickly now, rounding the chair. The man's face was a mask of terror, eyes wild and red-rimmed, duct tape across his mouth. When he saw me, he made a sound, a desperate, animal whine, and jerked his head frantically toward the door. I reached for the tape on his mouth, fingers fumbling with the edge. That's when I heard it. Behind me. The scraping sound again. Coming from the cot in the corner. I spun around. The cot was moving. No, something under the cot was moving. A shape unfolding from the shadows beneath it. Rising. Standing. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked like a person, but wrong. All wrong. The proportions were off, limbs too long, movements too fluid. In the firelight, I caught glimpses, pale skin, dark eyes, something that might have been a smile. Then it spoke with my voice. "I've got your propane delivery." Perfect mimicry. Every inflection identical. The bound man screamed behind his gag, thrashing violently in the chair. And I understood with horrible clarity, this wasn't the homeowner threatening someone. This was the homeowner, and something else was here with us. I ran. Survival instinct overriding thought. Burst through the door and into the killing cold, my heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. Got maybe 20 feet before my rational mind caught up with my panic and I realized how insane this was. What had I actually seen? A shape in the shadows. A trick of the firelight. My exhausted brain manufacturing threats where none existed. I'd been on the road since 4 a.m., driven 6 hours, worked on 3 hours of sleep. The isolation, the darkness, the strangeness of the cabin, of course I was seeing things. Hearing things. I forced myself to stop. Breathe. Think. There was a man tied up in that cabin. That part was real. Everything else, the thing under the cot, the voice mimicry, was exhaustion. Stress. My mind playing tricks. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course no signal. I was 12 miles from the nearest cell tower across a frozen lake. The rational thing was to go back. Untie the man. Get him in the truck. Drive back to Pile Bay and call the state troopers. Simple. Straightforward. So why was every fiber of my being screaming at me not to go back inside that cabin? I compromised. Grabbed the tire iron from my truck, a heavy mag light, and approached the door again. This time I stayed in the doorway, shining the light inside. The cabin was empty. Not just empty of the thing I'd seen. Empty of everything. The bound man, the chair, the table, all gone. Just the cot, the fireplace, the shelves. As if the entire scene I'd witnessed had never existed. What the fuck? I whispered. The mag light beam swept across the floor. No marks in the dust. No indentations where the chair had been. Nothing. Hallucination. Full-blown hallucination brought on by exhaustion and carbon monoxide poisoning. My truck's exhaust system had been acting up. I'd been breathing fumes for hours without realizing it. I backed away from the cabin, got in my truck, and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I needed to get off this lake. Needed to get somewhere with people and lights and sanity. The truck lurched forward. I followed the reflector poles back toward Pile Bay, driving too fast, the ice groaning beneath me. Halfway across, my headlights caught something on the ice ahead. A person. Standing directly in my path. I slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed, rear end sliding. When I got control and looked up, the person was gone. No. Not gone. Closer. Standing beside the driver's side window. Looking in at me. It was the bound man from the cabin. Patrick Newman. But he wasn't bound anymore. He was free. And his expression wasn't terror, it was something else. Something calculating. He raised his fist and slammed it against the window. Once. Twice. The glass spider-webbed. Impossible strength behind those blows. I gunned the engine. The truck shot forward, and I saw him in my rearview mirror, standing on the ice, watching me go. Then he started running. Faster than anyone should be able to run. Gaining on the truck. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. I was asleep in the cab, having a nightmare. Or dead. Maybe I'd crashed through the ice and this was my brain's last fireworks show before the cold stopped everything. The lights of Pile Bay appeared ahead. Civilization. Safety. I pushed the truck harder, the engine screaming. The running figure fell behind, finally disappearing into the darkness. I made it to the village, pulled up in front of the general store, and stumbled inside. 3 people looked up at me, tourists by the look of them, down from Anchorage for ice fishing. Call the state troopers, I gasped. There's someone, something, at the cabin. Coordinates. I fumbled for my phone, pulled up the delivery order, read off the GPS location. They called. Troopers said they'd send someone out in the morning when there was light. Asked if I was injured. Asked if I'd been drinking. I could hear the skepticism in the dispatcher's voice even over the phone. I spent the night in my truck in the village, doors locked, jumping at every sound. When dawn came, that same gray smudge of light, 2 troopers showed up and I rode out with them to the cabin. The ice road was solid. The cabin was there, exactly where it should be. We went inside. Empty. Abandoned. Not just empty like I'd seen it, but long-term abandoned. Dust thick on every surface. No recent fire in the fireplace, the ashes were stone cold, probably months old. No food in the cupboards. No sign of habitation at all. When's the last time you slept? One of the troopers asked gently. I know what I saw. I'm sure you do. But there's no one here. Hasn't been for a while. They walked the perimeter. Found my footprints from yesterday, only mine. No other tracks. No evidence of anyone else. The troopers drove me back to the village and suggested I see a doctor. Standard procedure for someone experiencing hallucinations. Could be a medical issue. Tumor. Stroke. Carbon monoxide poisoning like I'd suspected. I went to the clinic in Ileana. They ran tests. Everything came back normal. The doctor explained about exhaustion-induced psychosis, about how the brain can manufacture incredibly detailed false experiences. Gave me sleeping pills and told me to take a week off. I tried. God, I tried. But something kept nagging at me. I pulled up the delivery order on my company's system. Confirmed the name, Patrick Newman. Confirmed the address. The order had been placed 3 weeks ago, prepaid via credit card. I contacted my company's billing department. Asked them to check the credit card records. There was no credit card. The order had been placed by phone, cash payment promised on delivery. No record of who called it in. No recording. Our system only keeps recordings for 30 days and this was just past that. I drove back to Powell Bay 2 weeks later. Asked around about Patrick Newman. No one knew the name. The cabin, they said, had been abandoned for years. Built in the 90s by some entrepreneur from California who gave up on Alaska winters after one season. Been empty ever since. Although, the store owner mentioned, there was something weird about 5 years back. Guy went out there, squatting probably. Lived there through the winter. Troopers found him in April when the ice melted. Dead. Been dead for months. Starvation, mostly, but... He paused. The report said he'd been tied to a chair. Duct tape around his wrists and mouth. Like he'd been held prisoner. But there was no sign of anyone else. They figured he'd done it to himself. Some kind of psychotic break. Isolation madness. The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. You remember his name? The store owner checked his phone, pulled up an old news article. Patrick Newman. 42. From Anchorage. Had some kind of mental health crisis, families said. Came out here to find himself. Found something, I guess. Just not what he was looking for. I left Alaska 3 days later. Moved to Oregon. Took a job doing residential deliveries, nothing remote, nothing isolated. Started therapy. Told the therapist everything. She had a theory. That I'd somehow known about Patrick Newman's death, maybe heard about it years ago, filed it away unconsciously. That the isolation and exhaustion had pulled it up, created an elaborate false memory. That I'd never actually been inside the cabin, never seen anyone bound, never been chased across the ice. That I hallucinated the entire thing and my brain had retrofitted real information to make the hallucination seem plausible. I want to believe her. I take my medications. I attend my sessions. I sleep with the lights on and avoid being alone whenever possible. But here's what I can't explain. What I've never told anyone. When the troopers searched the cabin that morning, I noticed something on the floor. Barely visible in the dust. Recent disturbance. Like something had been dragged. Like a chair had sat there, then been moved. And in the fireplace, beneath the cold ashes, I saw it, a small piece of duct tape. Still tacky. Still fresh. I took it. Pocketed it while the troopers were outside. Brought it home. Had it tested at a private lab, paid in cash, didn't give my real name. The DNA came back. Matched to Patrick Newman, the man who died 5 years ago in that cabin. But the lab report showed something else. Something that doesn't make sense. The tape was only 3 weeks old. I burned the report. Threw away the tape. But I can't throw away what it means. Something wore Patrick Newman's face. Something tied him up and watched him die. Something that's still there, in that cabin, on that frozen lake. Waiting. And when I placed my delivery order, somehow it reached across 5 years, pulled me into a scene that had already happened, made me a witness to a death I should never have seen. Or maybe I saved him. Maybe he's still there, bound to that chair, existing in some pocket of time that loops endlessly. Maybe every time someone comes to that cabin, they see the same thing I did. Maybe he's been dying for 5 years and will keep dying forever. I don't know which possibility is worse. What I do know is that I wake up sometimes and I'm not sure where I am. Not sure what I am. I look in the mirror and wonder if the face looking back is really mine, or if I'm something else wearing my skin, waiting. The mind can trap you, the therapist says. Create prisons you can't escape. She has no idea how right she is. I still remember the exact moment everything fell apart. It was 11:47 p.m. on March 14th when the bell above the gas station door chimed, and my life split into before and after. I'd been working the graveyard shift at mile 82 fuel stop on the Sterling Highway for 8 months. 19 years old, saving every paycheck for college, trapped in that fluorescent purgatory between Anchorage and Homer where the highway cuts through absolutely nothing. Just endless darkness, snow-buried spruce trees, and the occasional trucker stopping for coffee and cigarettes. The kind of bone-deep isolation that makes you forget other people exist. That night started like any other. I'd restocked the beef jerky, wiped down the soda fountain, and settled behind the counter with my physics textbook. Outside, the March blizzard had been building for hours, transforming the world into a churning white void. The wind screamed against the windows with a sound like something dying. I hadn't seen a customer in 3 hours. Then the door opened. He stumbled in on a blast of Arctic air that made my teeth ache, and I knew immediately something was horrifically wrong. Blood. So much blood it didn't seem possible. It soaked through his parka, dripped from his fingertips onto the tile floor in a rhythm like a ticking clock. His face was bone white, lips blue, eyes wild with an animal terror I'd never seen in another human being. "Phone," he gasped, lurching toward the counter. "Please, God, I need the phone." I grabbed our landline with shaking hands, thrust it across the counter. He snatched it, his fingers leaving crimson smears on the plastic. "My wife," he choked out as he dialed 911. "My daughter." The car flipped. Mile 74, eastbound. They're trapped. The metal, the doors are crushed. Sarah can't feel her legs. Emma's not moving. "Please, they're freezing to death out there." The horror in his voice was so raw, so utterly genuine, that my own throat constricted. I could hear the 911 dispatcher's tinny voice asking questions. The man was crying now, full-body sobs that shook him like a seizure. 30 minutes, he screamed into the phone. "They don't have 30 minutes. It's 45 below out there." I called out that I had emergency blankets, a first aid kit. He didn't seem to hear me. He was lost in his nightmare, describing the crash over and over, how the ice sent them spinning, how they rolled 3 times, how he crawled out through the shattered windshield but couldn't get them free. "I had to leave them," he whispered, and the anguish in those words made my chest tight. I had to get help. I left them there alone in the dark. The dispatcher said emergency services were coming from Soldotna, fighting the same blizzard that had caused the crash. 40 minutes, maybe more. I told the man I'd make coffee, that he should sit down before he collapsed. He didn't acknowledge me. Just stood there dripping blood and melting snow, staring at nothing, whispering his wife's name like a prayer. I realize now that I should have noticed the wrongness. The way the pool of blood and water at his feet didn't quite spread right. The way his breath didn't fog in the air despite the cold still radiating from him. The way he never blinked. But I was tired. 3 months of midnight shifts had left me perpetually exhausted, my brain wrapped in cotton, unable to process anything beyond the immediate. So I made the coffee. Watched him stand there. Waited. When the paramedics finally arrived, I ran outside to meet them, pointing frantically down the highway toward mile 74. They looked at me strangely. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," one said, his voice careful, like I was a spooked animal. "What?" "No, the crash. There is a crash at mile 74, he said. "We need you to look at something." The cold hit me like a physical blow as I followed them to their ambulance. They showed me their computer screen. Accident report. Vehicle registered to Michael Chen, 39. Location, mile 74.5, Sterling Highway. Status, discovered by plow truck driver. Time of discovery, February 18th. February 18th. Nearly a month ago. That's impossible, I heard myself say. He was just here. He's inside right now. But when I turned to point, my words died. Through the gas station window, I could see the entire interior. Empty. The phone I handed him sat undisturbed on the counter. No puddles on the floor. No blood. No man. The driver who found the accident said they'd been there for at least 2 weeks based on snow accumulation, the paramedic continued, his words coming from very far away. The wife and daughter died on impact. The father. He paused. Michael Chen died of hypothermia approximately 3 hours after the crash, likely while trying to walk for help. No. My voice sounded strange. No, that's not. I talked to him. I gave him the phone. He was bleeding. "Miss, when's the last time you slept? Properly slept?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. Days blurred together. The endless night shifts, the white noise of insomnia during daylight hours, the way exhaustion had become my baseline state. "You're experiencing severe sleep deprivation," the paramedic said gently. "It causes hallucinations. Especially in isolation. Especially in conditions like this." He gestured at the whiteout around us. I let them walk me back inside. Let them sit me down. One of them checked my temperature while the other examined the gas station, looking for signs of the man I'd seen. They found nothing. Of course they found nothing. "The door never opened," one of them said, pointing to the security camera monitor behind the counter. "We can review the footage, but—" "I know what I saw," I whispered. But did I? The exhaustion was so profound, so all-consuming. I'd been working 70-hour weeks, sleeping in fragmented 3-hour chunks, living on coffee and energy drinks. My manager had commented on my appearance last week. Dark circles. Tremors in my hands. Difficulty focusing. "I think I'm just tired," I said, trying to convince myself. Really, really tired. They made me lock up the station. Drove me to Central Peninsula Hospital in Soldotna. The doctors ran tests. Blood work. CT scan. Everything came back normal except my core body temperature, 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Mild hypothermia. "You left the front door open," the doctor explained. "Based on the ice buildup, It was open for at least 90 minutes. You're lucky you're alive. I didn't open the door, I protested. The security footage shows you getting up at 11:43 p.m. and opening it, she said carefully. Then you stood there. Just stood in the doorway, staring out at the storm. For an hour and 47 minutes. You never closed it. You were having a complex hallucination brought on by hypothermia and sleep deprivation. They showed me the footage. And there I was, clear as day, walking to the door. Opening it. Standing motionless as snow blew into the station, as my body temperature plummeted, as my brain began to fail. On the grainy video, I could see my lips moving. Talking to no one. Handing the phone to empty air. Making coffee for ghosts. I spent 4 days in the hospital. Lost 3 toes on my left foot to frostbite. They turned black and had to be amputated. The stumps still ache when the weather changes, a permanent reminder of the night my mind betrayed me. The psychiatrist diagnosed me with a dissociative episode triggered by extreme stress, exhaustion, and environmental factors. She explained how the isolation of graveyard shifts in remote Alaska creates perfect conditions for psychosis. How my brain, starved for stimulation and human connection, had manufactured an entire scenario. How the crash I'd somehow known about, probably heard on the radio weeks before without consciously registering it, had bubbled up from my subconscious, transformed into a waking nightmare that felt utterly real. The human mind is fragile, she told me. Especially when pushed to extremes. I wanted to believe her. Tried to believe her. Took the medications they prescribed, attended the therapy sessions, quit the gas station job. Moved back to Anchorage with my parents. Started seeing a sleep specialist. Did everything right. But I can't forget what the police told me when they finally closed the case. They've recovered Michael Chen's body from his vehicle. The autopsy confirmed he died on February 18th, exactly where and when the plow driver found the wreck. But there was something the paramedics hadn't mentioned. Something they found that didn't make sense. 3 miles from the crash site, they discovered footprints in the snow. Fresh footprints, made sometime in mid-March during that blizzard. Leading from the vehicle toward the highway. Toward my gas station. The prints were identified as men's size 10 boots, same as Michael Chen wore. But the print stopped after a quarter mile. Just stopped. Like whoever made them had simply vanished into the whiteout. The official explanation, probably an animal. Maybe a bear with an unusual gait pattern. The snow was too disturbed by the storm to be certain. But I know. God help me, I know. Because last week, I was driving past that stretch of highway. Couldn't help myself. Had to see it. Mile 74.5. They'd cleared the wreckage months ago, but you could still see the scar in the trees where the vehicle had left the road. And as I slowed down, something made me look in my rearview mirror. He was standing there. On the side of the road. Exactly where he must have been that night. Michael Chen. Still in his blood-soaked parka. Still wearing that expression of animal terror. Still searching for help that came too late. I blinked and he was gone. My therapist says it's PTSD. Flashbacks. The mind playing tricks. She's increased my medication. Says the trauma created a false memory so vivid that it's become indistinguishable from reality. That my guilt over what happened, even though it wasn't my fault, manifests as these visions. I take my pills. Attend my sessions. Nod when she talks about healing in time and cognitive behavioral therapy. But I sleep with every light in my apartment blazing. I can't drive at night anymore. I've developed a compulsion to check my body temperature obsessively, terrified that I'll slip back into hypothermia and my brain will fracture again. Sometimes I lose hours and can't remember where I've been, and the terror that I might be hallucinating right now, that none of this is real, that I never left that gas station, it's paralyzing. The worst part isn't the fear or the nightmares or the medications or the missing toes. It's the uncertainty. The horrible, gnawing uncertainty. Because I remember his hand. When he reached for the phone, his fingers brushed mine. They were so cold they burned. I remember the weight of them. The solidity. The realness. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder, what if I wasn't hallucinating? What if something infinitely worse is true? What if the isolation and the cold and the endless darkness of Alaskan winter are a door that opens both ways? What if the dead can get lost too, wandering between states, desperate and confused, looking for help that will never come? What if he's still out there, trying to save a family that's already gone, trapped in that final desperate journey he never completed? The not knowing is killing me. Slower than the cold did, but just as surely. And every time I see my reflection, I have to check, really check, to make sure I'm still here. Still real. Still alive. Because I'm terrified that one day, I'll look in the mirror and see nothing at all. I moved to Wasilla for the quiet. After my divorce finalized and I lost the house in Anchorage, I needed somewhere affordable, somewhere I could rebuild my life at 28 with nothing but a used Toyota and $7,000 in savings. The duplex on Selden Road seemed perfect, cheap rent, decent neighborhood, close enough to my IT job at the hospital. The landlord mentioned my neighbor, Mr. Kovac, was very private but never any trouble. I should have asked what that meant. Stefan Kovac was maybe 65, Eastern European accent still thick after what must have been decades in America. Tall, thin to the point of gaunt, with pale gray eyes that never quite focused on you when he spoke. Which wasn't often. In the first month, our only interactions were brief nods when we happened to leave for work at the same time, him heading to his ancient Volvo sedan at exactly 7:47 a.m., me stumbling out closer to 8. The duplex was old, built in the 70s, with thin walls and thinner insulation. I could hear him moving around at night. Footsteps. The creak of floorboards. Nothing unusual for shared housing. Except the footsteps never stopped. Not at midnight. Not at 2 a.m. Not at dawn. I'd wake up at random hours to use the bathroom and hear him pacing. Always the same pattern, from what must have been his living room to the kitchen, pause, back again. Over and over. Insomnia, I figured. Lots of people struggle with sleep. God knows I did, lying awake replaying my marriage's collapse, wondering where everything went wrong. So I didn't think much of it. Not until the summer solstice. Alaska's midnight sun takes some getting used to. Daylight 20 hours a day, the sun barely dipping below the horizon before climbing back up. It messes with your circadian rhythm, makes sleep difficult even for people without racing thoughts and fresh divorce wounds. I'd taken to using blackout curtains and a sleep mask, but even then, my body knew it was never truly dark. On June 21st, the longest day of the year, I came home from work around 6 p.m. The sun blazed overhead like it was noon. I grabbed my mail from the box, bills, mostly, and a coupon flyer, and noticed something white in Mr. Kovac's box. Not mail. A folded piece of paper, tucked into the slot. I should have minded my own business. Should have gone inside, heated up some leftovers, watched Netflix until exhaustion finally pulled me under. But something about that folded paper bothered me. It looked handwritten. Deliberate. I glanced at his door. His car was in the driveway. He was home. Had probably been home all day. I noticed his car never moved on weekends. The curtains were drawn tight as always, that same amber glow visible around the edges that suggested every light in the house was on. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled the paper from his mailbox. My hands went cold when I unfolded it. June 21st. Departed residence, 6:13 a.m. Returned, 6:04 p.m. 51 minutes unaccounted for. Wearing blue shirt, khaki pants, brown shoes, same as June 20th, June 19th, June 18th, concerning pattern. Checked phone 23 times during transit to vehicle. Spoke to someone on phone, female voice, elevated tone, possible conflict. Entered residence, 6:04 and 17 seconds p.m. Locked deadbolt, 6:04 and 31 seconds p.m. Lights on, living room, kitchen. Bedroom, dark. The papers slipped from my numb fingers. This was about me. He was watching me. Tracking me. Timing me down to the second. My first instinct was anger. My second was fear. Because how did he know I checked my phone 23 times? That would require watching me constantly, counting every glance at my screen. And the phone call, he'd heard my conversation with my sister through, what? Was he listening through the walls? Recording me? I looked at his window. The curtain twitched. My skin crawled. I grabbed the paper, marched to his door, and knocked. Hard. Silence. Then footsteps. The same deliberate pace I heard every night. The door opened exactly 4 inches, as far as the security chain would allow, and Stefan Kovac's pale eyes peered out at me. Yes? His voice was flat. Emotionless. What the hell is this? I shoved the paper toward the gap. He looked at it for a long moment. You opened my mail. You're spying on me. Not spying. Observing. There's a difference. The calm in his voice was somehow worse than if he'd yelled. You're tracking my movements. Writing down what I wear. This is insane. This is illegal. I observe all neighbors. For safety. Safety from what? Threats. He said it like it was obvious. Patterns reveal threats. Inconsistencies indicate danger. I must know. Must stay aware. You're sick. You need help. I was backing away now, the paper crumpled in my fist. I'm calling the police. They already know. He pushed a thin folder through the gap. They came. April 2019. I showed them. They understood. I didn't want to touch that folder. Every instinct screamed not to. But I took it. Inside were police reports. 3 of them. Neighbors from his previous address in Anchorage had complained about surveillance. Officers had investigated. Found notebooks, hundreds of them, filled with observations. But no cameras, no recording devices, nothing technically illegal. Just one man watching through his windows, writing down everything he saw. The reports noted possible paranoid personality disorder and recommended psychiatric evaluation, but no charges filed. No laws broken. You need to stop, I said, my voice shaking now. Stop watching me. Stop writing about me. Can't stop. Must observe. Must record. Must understand patterns. His fingers drummed against the doorframe. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. Rhythmic. Compulsive. You're safe now. I watch. I keep track. Nothing will happen while I watch. He closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home with a heavy click, then his footsteps retreating into the depths of his side of the duplex. I called the police. They came out that evening, a young officer named Morrison who looked barely old enough to shave. He took my statement, examined the note, knocked on Kovac's door. Had a conversation I couldn't hear. Came back shaking his head. He says he's documenting neighborhood activity for security purposes. Technically, he's not breaking any laws. He's observing from his own property, not trespassing, not recording audio or video. The notes are concerning, but... Concerning? He's stalking me. I understand your frustration, ma'am. And I'm going to file this report. It'll create a paper trail in case his behavior escalates. But right now, looking out windows and taking notes isn't illegal. I'd recommend documenting any interactions, maybe getting a restraining order if you feel threatened. Restraining order? Against my next-door neighbor. In a duplex where we shared a wall. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound from his side made my heart race. The footsteps. The pacing. And now, knowing he was watching, I felt exposed even with curtains drawn. How much could he see? What was he writing about me right now? I got up around 2 a.m., desperate for water, and made the mistake of peeking through my curtains toward his side. Every light was on. Every single light. And through the gap in his curtains, I could see him. Sitting at his kitchen table. Writing. Page after page after page, his hand moving in mechanical precision, never stopping, never slowing. The next morning, there was another note in my mailbox. June 22nd. Subject awoke at 2:13 a.m. Checked window at 2:14 a.m. Observed observer, reciprocal surveillance, new pattern, concerning. Returned to bed 2:19 a.m. Lights off, 2:22 a.m. Note, sleep disruption increasing. Day 14 of pattern. Possible correlation with phone calls from female contact. Recommend monitoring for deterioration. He'd watched me watching him. And he was tracking my sleep patterns. For 2 weeks. I called in sick to work. Spent the day researching Stefan Kovac online. Found almost nothing. No social media. No LinkedIn. The only reference was an old news article from 2003, former defense intelligence analyst granted early retirement following classified incident. Defense intelligence. He'd been a spy. Or some kind of analyst. Trained to observe, to collect information, to identify patterns and threats. And something had broken him. I tried the landlord next. He was sympathetic but unhelpful. Stefan's been renting for 6 years. Never late on rent. Never any damage. I can't evict him for being weird. He's not weird, he's dangerous. Has he threatened you? No, but... Then my hands are tied. You want out of your lease, I understand. But I can't force him to move. Breaking my lease meant losing my security deposit and probably owing additional rent. Money I didn't have. So I was trapped. Trapped next to a man who watched me constantly, who documented my every movement, who was spiraling deeper into whatever madness had ended his intelligence career. The notes continued. Every day. Increasingly detailed. He knew when I showered, 7:12 a.m. on weekdays, 9:30 a.m. on weekends. Knew what I ate for breakfast, toast and coffee, always. Knew how many times I checked my phone per hour, averaging 37. Knew my sister called every Tuesday at 7 p.m. and we talked for 43 minutes on average. But it was the other observations that truly terrified me. The interpretations. July 8th. Subject demonstrating increased anxiety responses. Checking door locks, 3x per exit, up from 1x degradation of security confidence. Scanning environment, constant, hypervigilance developing. Conclusion, subject becoming aware of threats. Good. Awareness is survival. July 15th. Subject deviated from standard route to work. Took Pittman Road instead of Parks Highway, first deviation in 47 days. Possible evasion behavior. Possible external threat forcing pattern change. Investigation required. He thought he was protecting me. In his fractured mind, this obsessive surveillance was keeping me safe from undefined threats. And my growing paranoia, caused entirely by him, was validating his delusion. I started changing everything. My routine, my routes, my habits. Trying to be unpredictable. But he adapted. The notes reflected every change, analyzed every deviation, drew conclusions that made no sense but followed their own internal logic. Then came July 23rd. I found the notebook in my mailbox. Not a note. An entire composition notebook, the kind kids use in school. My name was written on the cover, subject, female, Unit B, designation, Sparrow. Sparrow. He'd given me a code name. Inside were 17 pages. Dense, tiny handwriting covering every line. Dates going back to February, before I'd even moved in. He'd been tracking the previous tenant and seamlessly switched to tracking me when I arrived. Every entry was time-stamped. Every observation cataloged. But these weren't just movements. These were predictions. March 3rd, Sparrow will receive phone call at 19 to 19:15. Female contact. Duration, 40 to 45 minutes. My sister had called March 3rd at 7:04 p.m. We'd talked for 42 minutes. April 17th, Sparrow will deviate from standard schedule due to external appointment. Departure, 14 to 14:30. I'd had a dentist appointment April 17th, left at 2:18 p.m. May 22nd, Sparrow will experience emotional distress. Crying episode predicted between 22 to 2300 hours. May 22nd was my wedding anniversary. I'd cried myself to sleep that night around 10:30. He wasn't just observing. He was predicting. He'd identified patterns in my behavior so precisely that he could forecast my actions. And he was right. Again and again and again. The last entry was dated 3 days in the future, July 26th. Sparrow will attempt confrontation. Predicted time, 18 to 2000 hours. Predicted outcome, escalation. Predicted response, necessary intervention. Threat level, elevated. Action required, containment. Containment. My blood turned to ice. What did containment mean? I called Officer Morrison. Left 3 voicemails. He finally called back that evening, apologetic. I've been trying to help, but without a direct threat. He's threatening me. This notebook, the predictions, he says he needs to contain me. Can you forward me photos of the pages? I did. Waited. Morrison called back an hour later. Ma'am, I showed these to our detective unit. They agree it's disturbing. But it's still not illegal. The predictions could be explained by observation. If he's watched you long enough, he's learned your patterns. That's not supernatural. That's just dedication. Unhealthy dedication, but not criminal. What about containment? That's the concerning part. I'm going to request a welfare check, see if we can get him evaluated. But I need you to understand, if he's not an immediate danger to himself or others, they can't force treatment. When is the welfare check? Probably tomorrow or the next day. July 26th was tomorrow. The day he predicted I'd confront him. The day he'd written containment with such certainty. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in my living room with every light on, a knife from the kitchen on the coffee table, listening to his endless pacing next door. Around 3 a.m., the pacing stopped. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Silence was worse than the pacing. At 6:47 a.m., I heard his door open. Heard footsteps on the shared porch. Then my doorknob rattled. He was trying to get in. "Mr. Kovac?" My voice cracked. "What are you doing?" "You deviated." His voice through the door was different. Agitated. "The pattern is wrong. You should be sleeping. You're awake. Wrong pattern. Broken pattern. Must fix pattern. Must restore order. Go back inside. Please. Can't restore order with broken patterns. Broken patterns invite chaos. Chaos invites threats. You're threatened. I have to fix it. Have to contain the variables." The doorknob rattled harder. I'd locked the deadbolt, thank God, but the door was old, the frame soft wood. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911. The doorknob stopped rattling. "You're calling them," Kovac said. "Predicted. Day early, but predicted. External intervention. Adds variables. More chaos. The police are coming. Go back inside. Police were here. June 22nd. They don't understand. Can't understand. Only I understand. Only I see the patterns." The door shuddered. He was shouldering it. The frame creaked. "Only I can keep you safe," he continued, his voice calm again. Terrifyingly calm. 17 years of service. 17 years identifying threats. Prevented 43 hostile actions. Saved countless lives. They said I was paranoid. Said I saw patterns that weren't there. But I was right. I'm always right. The patterns don't lie. The door cracked. Wood splintering. I ran for the back door, phone pressed to my ear, 911 dispatcher asking me to confirm my address. Made it to my bedroom, slammed the door, shoved my dresser against it. From the front of the duplex, I heard my door finally give way. Heard him enter. Heard his footsteps, that same measured pace, moving through my living room. "Sparrow," he called out. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help. To protect. To restore order." The bedroom door handle turned. "I know you're afraid. Fear is natural. But I've been watching. I know you. I know when you sleep, when you wake, what you eat, who you talk to, when you're sad, when you're happy. I know you better than anyone. Better than your ex-husband. Better than your sister. Better than you know yourself." The dresser scraped forward as he pushed against the door. "And I know what you need. You need structure. Order. Protection. I can provide that. I've been providing it. But you keep introducing chaos. Keep deviating. I have to stop the deviations. Have to fix the pattern. Have to." The dresser toppled. The door swung open. Stefan Kovac stood in my doorway, backlit by my living room lights, holding a composition notebook. Not a weapon. Just a notebook and a pen. "Please," he said, his voice breaking now. "Please let me help you. Let me keep you safe. The world is so dangerous. So many threats. But I can track them. I can identify them. I can keep you safe if you just follow the pattern. Just be predictable. Just be safe. Sirens. Growing louder. He heard them too. His head tilted, listening. They're here, he said. Predicted. July 26th, between 6 to 7 o'clock. Pattern holds. He turned and walked calmly back through my apartment, out the broken door, and sat down on the porch steps. When the police arrived 90 seconds later, he was writing in his notebook, documenting their arrival time with precision. They took him away. Not to jail, to Alaska Psychiatric Institute in Anchorage. Emergency psychiatric hold. The investigation of his duplex revealed what I'd feared, 17 years of notebooks. Floor to ceiling. Every wall lined with shelves, every shelf packed with composition notebooks. Thousands of them. Documenting every person who'd ever lived near him, every neighbor, every mail carrier, every delivery driver. Millions of observations going back to 2006 when he retired from Defense Intelligence. The official diagnosis was severe paranoid personality disorder with obsessive-compulsive features triggered by post-traumatic stress from his intelligence work. He'd spent years identifying genuine threats to national security, connecting dots others missed, preventing attacks through pattern recognition. But when he retired, his brain didn't stop. Couldn't stop. It kept finding patterns, kept identifying threats that didn't exist, kept trying to prevent disasters that were never coming. And I'd become his latest mission. His latest pattern to control. They kept him institutionalized. Medicated. Monitored. I moved out of the duplex the same day, staying with my sister in Anchorage until I could find a new place. But here's what I can't escape. When they inventoried his notebooks, they found the predictions. Hundreds of them. And the accuracy rate was 93%. 93%. The psychiatrists explained it away. Pattern recognition taken to pathological extremes. Observational skills honed by years of intelligence work, weaponized by mental illness. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just a broken mind seeing connections invisible to everyone else. I want to believe them. But last week, I found something in my belongings I packed from the duplex. One of his notebooks, somehow mixed in with my things. And on the last page, an entry dated today. Right now. August 15th. Sparrow will find notebook. We'll read final entry. We'll question reality of predictions. We'll seek answers. Conclusion: some patterns transcend observation. Some watchers see more than what is visible. Some threats come from trying too hard to prevent them. Final note: the watched becomes the watcher. Pattern complete. Subject will monitor herself now. I succeeded. I'm writing this at 11:47 p.m. Every light in my apartment is on. I've checked the locks 4 times in the last hour. I know because I counted. I've started noticing patterns in my own behavior. When I eat. When I sleep. When I call my sister. And I can't stop cataloging them. Can't stop watching myself. Stefan Kovac never touched me. Never hurt me. But he infected me with something worse than violence. He taught me to see the patterns. And now I can't unsee them. I bought a notebook yesterday. Just in case. Just to document. Just to keep track. Just to stay safe.